So here we are at the Natural History Museum Gardens, and today we're going to talk a little bit about environmental DNA. I know we have DNA as humans, but tell me a little bit about the environment, John.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right, we have DNA, but so do the plants, the animals, the fungi, the bacteria around us. Environmental DNA works on the principle that as species live in an environment or move through it, they leave a little bit of their DNA behind.
Yes.
So it could be
Bit of hair.
shed skin, bit of hair, yeah. It could be the roots from a plant, for example, or for really small organisms, it could be the bacteria itself. So eDNA is basically you're taking samples from these environments and looking for the DNA within that to reconstruct a picture of the different species that live there. So it's a bit like a detective story. You're looking for clues and evidence of the species that have moved through that area, for example. And it's a rapidly moving field of research in science and nature conservation, because it is really tackling one of the big problems we have, which is, well, to protect habitat in an area, to protect the species, you need to know what's there.
Yes.
You need to know how and why those populations are changing. But identifying species takes a lot of expertise, and some things like bacteria you can't identify by eye. So by looking for the DNA, you can actually look at whole communities of life at scale. You don't have to have the skills as an individual to identify them. You can do it through the DNA sequence.
So we're looking at water from the ponds. What else are we looking at?
Yeah, so exactly. So water from the pond, soil.
Soil
Sample, 1 or 2 grams of soil could have 500, 1,000 species of life in it.
Wow.
Or the DNA from that. We can take DNA from the air.
Okay.
We can filter the air and see what we have. So pollen grains, for example, have DNA in. We can swab buildings, we can swab this fence and see what's living where. And if we do that repeatedly, we can look over time and see how the wildlife is changing.
Yeah, and that's super valuable for us to really understand the impact of humans on our natural environment and all of our, friends, bacteria, animals that live with us and share the space.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like a very large scale of data that we're collecting. What are some of the challenges?
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about opportunities.
Yeah.
Some of the challenges are it's the scale. So 50, 100 DNA samples could have hundreds of thousands, low millions of DNA sequences coming out. There's a volume piece there, which is, we can do that with cloud services in particular, we can handle that. A bigger challenge is that the DNA sequence we get from the computational system is essentially a series of letters. It's the bases that make up the DNA in the order they're in. We need to convert that to some useful species data, so put a taxonomic name on it. And the way that DNA sequencing works is global science community have a global database. It uses naming that's globally accepted. Whereas in the UK, if we want to share the data we have with conservation biologists, other scientists, we use a UK naming system, which is nearly the same, almost always the same, but not quite in the same place.
Like a Canadian in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. And most of the time it's the same, but most of the time isn't good enough. We need to make sure it's always the same. So with the support of AWS, we've developed something called the Taxonomic Equivalence Engine, which automates that process. It converts the global data we get from our sequences, DNA sequences, into the UK naming system, which is great, because it means that when we bring in all the other data that's out there on UK wildlife, we know we're using the same name. We're comparing like for like, which is a fundamental block, right? Building block for the science we do. But the other part of the system, which is something that really excites me, is that it automatically highlights species that the DNA have found that aren't known from the UK. Okay. So we can pinpoint our work and look at it and go, well, is that realistic? Could it be something that we've just not spotted here before, or that's recently arrived? Or could it just be an error in the database? Which in terms of science discovery is brilliant. And I guess that whole process is something I've always done myself. It can take a day, 2 days to do that. Now it takes 2 to 3 minutes.
Oh my God, incredible.
And it's always done in the same way because it's computer coded. So it takes that human error out of the equation as well, which for me, in terms of accelerating my personal research, is a brilliant one.
Yes, a supercharged John. And I think that's really, how we like to work at Amazon and AWS, which is really working backwards from the challenge and really understanding what's needed to help us accelerate scientific research. And that's really the mission of this partnership. And it's amazing to hear not only are we accelerating and enabling scientists to do more within that same time, but also to be more focused and directed in terms of highlighting areas to focus on if there's an error, to sense check, but also new discovery, which is super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, we're trying to reach the same endpoint of nature and recovery. And we know we're in a critical phase, a planetary emergency. We have to work together to do that. So bringing the science expertise and that driver to understand how and why nature's changing, which is essentially data-based, and with a big data tech company who can really support us through a lot of those challenges of how you bring the data together, how you can package it and share it for others. So the data on the wildlife here in the garden or elsewhere in the UK are brilliant for understanding how communities' life are changing, how they're responding to positive actions we take. We can use that to refine the approaches we take, so it supports all species, not just a few, for example.
Yeah, and it's really bringing the best of our capabilities in technology and data and all of the expertise of the scientists here at the Natural History Museum to ultimately help us chart that path towards nature recovery, knowing where to double down, where to course correct, in hopes for a biodiverse and beautiful natural world for us all to enjoy.
Absolutely, data-led recovery of nature, and of course that supports people in doing that as well.
Love that. So we're very excited. It's only just the beginning, and look forward to chatting more. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
Bye.